Q2 has been a really interesting time. Q1 was obviously very slow off the back of a lot of uncertainty created around December. So Q1 hiring volumes are very much lower. Q2 really been a tale of two halves. The first half of Q2, much in the Q1 vein, people still a lot of uncertainty, hiring was right down. Q2 has seen revenues return, it's seen the hiring return, and it's seen a much greater focus on upskilling, particularly around the business development skill set. The hiring activity in Q2 has been way more aggressive compared to Q1 and actually more in line with Q2 of last year, and particularly towards the latter end. We've seen growth and demand across, really cross-sector. It's not been specific sectors that have outperformed each other, it's more been pockets and specialties within sectors. Obviously tech, always a big booming space, still very much driven by the growth. A lot of that driven off the back of AI and interesting tech developments. We've seen growth within the pharmaceutical space. We've also seen growth across frameworks, government contract-driven work, professional services to a degree. Finance has been perhaps a touch slower off the back of all the uncertainty. But I think the real focus has been around the types of hiring. There's been more of a focus on business development type people, perhaps moving away from delivery-focused consultants. There's been quite a change in demand for skill sets, and I think this has come off the back of the last 2 years in recruitment has been relatively easy. It's been very available for companies to hire any sort of talent, plug them in and see them be very profitable. We've now returned to a sort of pre-pandemic normal, where ultimately the recruitment market it's tough by comparison to the last couple of years, but not tough by comparison to what came before. Companies are reverting to the core competencies rather than a profile-driven recruitment. We're returning to the core competencies that were always important, particularly around hard work, motivation and resilience. We've had a focus away from flashy profiles and people with certain universities or certain experiences and more towards these core competencies where they can demonstrate that. That's what's ultimately gone on to be more successful. My forecast for Q3 is we're going to return to the kind of hiring we saw in Q3 last year and Q2 last year. We're going to see much more aggressive hiring. We're going to see the big recruiters who've been relatively quiet over Q1 and Q2, catching up the hiring plans which they set at the beginning of the year but then they paused. So that's going to create quite an abundance of competition for good quality talent, which is going to lead back to a very candidate-driven marketplace. Particular focus is going to be around those grittier business development type skills, as opposed to just candidate sources and generators. But I think that's going to create that sort of acute competition. I see a number of challenges for employers in the coming months. First and foremost, the challenge will be competition. As we return to more of a candidate-driven marketplace, it's going to become ever more difficult to differentiate your business, your brand, your employee value proposition and why people should join you. But the candidates of today don't just look at one sector. They tend to look multi-sector, multi-function in their job search. The competition you have is not from the people to the left and to the right of you, but it's to companies in completely different industries. It's pharmaceutical companies, it's startups, it's everything. So you've got to try and differentiate your business not just against your competitors, but against the whole marketplace. What's this going to do? It's likely to drive salary. These things tend to drive salary. Cost of living is still very much in the forefront of everyone's mind. Salary expectations are rising. We're certainly seeing graduate salaries comfortably north of 25,000 now, heading more towards the 30,000 sort of mark, which whilst unheard of a few years ago, is now becoming more and more commonplace. Looking ahead to the rest of 2023, I think 3 words sort of stand out: speed, sell and salary. So what do I mean by speed? Well, there's 2 aspects to this. Firstly, if you're thinking about your hiring plans now, my advice is always go early. The bigger firms tend to wait to do the blocks of their hiring. The earlier you can start out, the more advantage you get seeing the best candidates before everyone else sweeps them up. Also, speed in terms of the process. As recruiters, we know that slow processes kill candidates, yet ultimately, recruiters, when they're hiring for themselves, tend to break all those rules, slow process down, have multiple stages. These are all the deaths of attracting the very best candidates. Go fast to get the best people. When we talk about sell. Too many businesses still focus on what can the candidate do for them rather than what can they do for the candidate. This is much more about employee value proposition. Why would a candidate come and work for you? You need to articulate that, and you need to be clear in what that proposition is and be able to sell it in a relevant way to the person sat in front of you. And finally, salary. It is becoming more and more competitive out there, and with the cost of living crisis, salary is a massive factor. It is a massive part of how they will make that decision. Go with the most aggressive salary you can first off, because it tends to attract the best people.